Hey guys, it's Draken. Since many of you guys can read, I'm just going to jump right into it. I have 2 semi-automatic Strifes, 2 stockade stocks, and 2 zombie strike crossbows. It's not the crossbow that I wanted, but it's a crossbow that will work for what I'm trying to do. I am attempting to make a very cool HVZ style zombie strike crossbow hybrid blaster that will be semi-automatic and functional, and overall should just be really neat. But since I was already going to make one, I want to make a twin for it that the Draculina can use. So without any further ado, I'm going to start breaking down the blasters, show you where I make my cuts, start modifying these Strifes, and get right into it. The only thing that I want to mention is I got these Strifes out of mission kits, and it's very strange, but you can see that they have flat screws. Not flat head screws, but flat Phillips head screws. I thought that was a little bit weird, but it's cool because it'll help me keep these screws from the respective shells distinctive. So without any further ado, I'm going to crack all 4 blasters and show you what we're working with internally. So you can see here at this point that I've taken apart pretty much all of the shells except for these stockade stocks, but at this point I want to point out that there are things that we're going to need and things that we aren't going to need. We're going to need most of the parts of the Strife minus all of the goofy locks. I've done this before in a tutorial on the Strife, but the locks aren't necessary. We're going to need the clip release, so we need to maintain that. We're going to need the rev. We're going to need to make some modifications to the trigger. We're going to need to remove this lock. All these electronic locks and resistors are going to have to go, and we're generally just going to have to clean up the internals. I don't think that we're going to need these pieces. And then as far as the zombie strike blaster internals, I want to keep the handle because I think that the handle is really cool actually and could be used for a future integration. It's also got a sweet trigger to that end. That said, all of these top internals are going to have to go, including the smart AR configuration, but I think that I might save the bottom part of the AR configuration because I may want to put 2 storage dart places in here as opposed to having a gaping hole here and then 2 gaping holes here, because I'm going to have to run my barrel through the front of this blaster. All in all, the project is shaping up pretty nicely at this point, and I'm hoping that things come together like I've planned. Hey guys, so in this segment I'm going to show you that all of the blaster shells have been gutted for the most part, with the exception of the Strife's electronic internals, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Over here I have all the mechanical internals for the Strife, minus these locks, which I've destroyed, but you'll notice that these pieces are all in the same spot that they would be if they were laid into a Strife. There's a reason for that. Even though you could go back and watch this video, it's much easier to just lay out your parts the same way that I lay out mine, with all of the respective screws in the respective places. That way, when it comes time to put these blaster pieces back into their shell, you know exactly where they go and what screws to use, which is super duper helpful. These 4 are the longer versions of screws that end up holding the flywheel assembly in. Now, I'm going to cut this out at the anode and the cathode, and I'm going to remove all of the electronic locks except for the rev switch, because I kind of want to keep the rev switch in the place that it originally is in, so that I can one-hand wield these, so that I can dual-wield these, which I think will be really, really neat. But I'm removing this electronic lock, which comes from up here. I'm removing this electronic lock, which comes from in here, I believe, and the blaster should be very, very smooth in its functioning. I'm also going to just completely rewire it because the wire that Hasbro uses is crummy, but I'm going to leave the original battery tray in because I like it. I'm also going to remove this piece, and then I'm going to come in, and these flywheel blasters have resistors built into each one of their motor ports, and I'm going to completely gut those out and rewire that as well. A lot of people, or not a lot, some people think that it's necessary to change these flywheel or these motors out. I don't think that that's really necessary. I think that when they work and they handle overvolting well, it's just fine to keep them in there. Plus they fit and you don't have to modify your shells. Since I'm already doing some pretty heavy shell modification for this, I don't want to go too terribly overboard. I also recommend removing this screw and this screw because it lets these pieces stay in and then you can just pull them out. I don't think that they serve a purpose, and sometimes they cause jams and get in the way when they kind of go TP mode on a dart. Other than that, I've gone ahead and chipped these pins out so that this lifted off of the Zombie Strike crossbow. And now I have these handles, which I can use for another mod. I think that they're pretty sweet. If you can think of something to do with them, don't hesitate to let me know, because I haven't decided yet, but I have 2 of them, and I think that they're pretty cool. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and put these halves back together so that I can lay them into these halves after I gut out the remainder of these electronics, and we can start drawing lines to figure out where we're going to make our cuts. This is looking pretty neat at this point. So at this point, both crossbows have been bound with hot glue after making their initial cuts, and there's kind of a gap filling method that I use where I just grabbed scrap plastic and I've made the initial gap filling here so that there's something solid to put the putty up against. But I wanted to mention in this segment that if you leave your epoxy putty outside in the heat, especially with a summer like this, for like an hour before you start working with it, and sometimes that's a luxury that you can't afford if time is precious, but if you plan your mod out in advance and leave your epoxy putty out in the heat, it gets really, really soft and really workable, and it makes it just that much easier to do this part of the mod. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and putty over all of this gap filling and integration so that I can sand it down later and make it look really, really nice. Alright, so you guys can see here that both shells have been completely epoxy puttied, and then I've sanded down the putty, and on this one I've sanded down the blaster in its complete form, and I've gone ahead and sanded off all the logos, but I still need to go over it with fine sandpaper and get all of the plastic pieces, as well as just make sure this is even smoother than it currently is. Right now, it is a really nice clean integration, and I like that a lot. This shows the next step, because this one I have sanded after sanding down all the logos, and I've gone ahead and broken it apart, gutted it completely, and washed it, and it has finished drying out in the sun, so it's ready to go. Still don't know what I want to do with these handles, but I went ahead and attached these pieces back on just in case. I'm going to work on the electronic portion of the blaster real quick while I wait to wash this. Alright guys, so this is just a quick segment showing some of the painting of the parts. You can see that one bow is going to be a red trim, one bow is going to be a blue trim. As always, I'm using Krylon Satin Fanger Red for plastic, and then I like to use the gloss version of the True Blue, so these pieces are being painted. A lot of the smaller pieces have already been painted. The stockade stocks are being done up in black, which is sweet, and then over here I have my main bodies completely sanded, washed, dried, and ready for their coats of Krylon Fusion for Plastic Satin Black, which should make just a really nice base coat. You can see I started and then decided that I need to make a segment on it. So I'm just going to finish dusting these inside and out and making sure that they are ready to handle being put back together with their brand new internals. You can see that I leave this cover on at first, and then after I've got a good dusting, because it's currently protecting these internals, I could tape them off, but that seems unnecessary. I'm just going to put an extra coat of the trim color on the battery cover doors. So I'm going to start doing this, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Hey guys, so this step is pretty necessary if you're going to constantly be overvolting your flywheels, which is something I'm going to do here. I have hot glue set up, soldering gun, and then a handheld soldering gun, and these aren't both necessary, but you're going to need at least one. First, I come in with snips, and I snip here, 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 and here to cut out these resistors, and then I come in and I rewire it with heavier gauge wire. Heavier gauge wire just makes sense if you're going to be putting higher amperages through it, so I've rewired it, and these are ready to have their leads attached to it. You can see that they're just exposed and then insulated. Then I put the rubber covers back on. I take this piece, glue it into the flywheels, and then I glue PVC 3/4 inch in as my running rail through here, and that's a pretty straight shot. And then up here at the top, before I painted it, I attached masking tape so that I can come in and put a coupler on, which will be orange when we're all said and done. But I wanted it to be clean so that it would be easier to attach a coupler. So we're getting pretty close to the finish line here. I'll probably show you one more internal segment before we're done. So this is the final segment before I put the blasters together. You can see that the blasters have been completely rewired with a much heavier gauge wire. I left the original switches because frankly I like the original switches. I like that they fit in the space. I think that that's nice. I like getting to use the original plastic components. I think that it'll make for a much cleaner mod. Anyhow, I have gone ahead and added back in all of the little pieces. I, somewhere along the line while painting, misplaced these pieces, but when I find those, I'm going to put the blasters back together. The only other thing that I need to add is I'm going to cut this and add it back in so that I have kind of not only a gap filler, but also extra dart storage down here. Everything else is functioning well and looks good, so I'm very pleased with the blaster. I can't wait to overvolt it when I'm done, because again, I'm using the original battery compartment. Everything original externally is going to help the blaster look like this was how it was designed, and very, very clean. But this is the red blaster, this is the blue blaster. I finally figured out names for them partway into the mod, and I'm looking forward to detailing them, labeling them, and making a final segment showing you how we did it. Alright guys, so this is the final segment for my twin Crossfire bows, Strifefires. It's a Strife with an integrated crossbow, and I think that they are really nice. I don't mind the orange, I think that it's fine, and I like the red detailing and red paint on here, as well as the blue one. I've named them Faden and Zarek, and they are finished. I made them for kind of like a goofy blaster, I guess, because flywheel blasters will never be as ideal for HVZ as like a solid pump action Springer, but I think that they're fun. I like the rapid fire. I think that that's kind of cool, and I wanted to make just kind of a fun stock class blaster, so I made it more like a rifle. They can be akimboed, and I have a video showcasing that I'll put a link to in the description box, but they're designed to be shouldered like a rifle. It has a very comfortable stock and foregrip, so that it's got a very nice profile for that. The bow arms I added because I like bow arms on my crossbow style blasters. A lot of people would take them off and not add them, but I think that they're sweet and I like them a lot, so I left them on. But all in all, I think that the blaster is very nice with all the mods that have been done, and I've overvolted it to... Give me a second to think here. I think it's been overvolted to about 11.5 volts with the battery configuration I have in it, and it's nice. It's shooting about what you'd expect for a modded Strife like that. So I'm going to fire off 6 rounds each, and then I'll cut the segment. So there's that. And all in all, I'm just really pleased with it. If you liked this mod, be sure to subscribe for more cool stuff. I'm just trying to upload as many neat mod videos as I can before the semester starts back, and then when we get to that point, we'll talk about what kind of upload schedule you guys would like then. So, thanks for watching.